Hello and welcome to our 6 p.m. newscast on Tuesday, December 1st. Here in Seoul, I'm Mark Broom, filling in for Daniel Che this evening. Let's start by taking a look at the headlines. The world will soon have a new reserve currency. The IMF has admitted the Chinese yuan to the exclusive club. But where will it leave Korea? We have a special report. The fall is less pronounced than the previous month, but Korea's exports tumble yet again in November, with exports fading even faster. The Nation posts a record trade surplus. Plus, President Park Geunhye tells world leaders assembled in Paris for climate talks that collective action is required to slash emissions. She also touts Korea's efforts to make Jeju Island a carbon-free zone. The International Monetary Fund has given the green light to include China's currency, the yuan, in its basket of reserve currencies. Joining this elite club marks an important milestone for policymakers in Beijing. But what does it mean for Korea? Hwang Ji-hye starts us off.
Starting in October of next year, the Chinese yuan will become one of the world's elite currencies. The IMF on Monday added the yuan to its basket of reserve currencies, a designation known as the Special Drawing Rights, or SDR.
The addition and the inclusion of the renminbi in the SDR basket of currencies is a recognition of the significant reforms which have been conducted, of the significant opening up of the Chinese economy, of the financial more market-driven principles that are being used by the Chinese authorities going forward.
The IMF uses the reserve basket when providing emergency loans for countries like Greece, and only 4 currencies, the US dollar, the euro, the Japanese yen, and the pound, are included in the group.
This is a great step toward making the RMB truly international and encouraging individuals and organizations of all countries in the world to hold it as well as invest it.
And the inclusion brings Korea a step closer to its goal of emerging as an international hub for offshore yuan transactions, as the country marks the 1-year anniversary of its direct trading market with the Chinese currency. For the past year, the amount of average daily transactions of won-yuan direct trading stood at around $2.2 billion, and that matches over a quarter of the amount in won-dollar daily transactions. Korea's financial authorities aim to further boost the market with a set of new measures.
The market currently uses a market average for the won to dollar exchange and the cross rate for the yuan and dollar. But from next year, it will adopt a direct quote between the won and yuan.
While the yuan's new status is expected to have a limited impact on the overall Korean economy in the short term, experts predict that it will ease risks stemming from possible global currency shocks as it diversifies currencies used in trade settlements. They add, though, it will also further raise Korea's dependence on China, an outcome that could have both negative and positive effects. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Now, it's been a dismal year so far for Korea's exports, but figures for November fell less than expected, offering a slight glimmer of hope. For more on whether it'll be enough of a turnaround to get the economy back on track before the year is out, Kwon-swa reports.
Outbound shipments dropped by 4.7% in November compared to last year, marking the 11th consecutive month of decline. However, there were some signs of recovery. According to Korea's Trade Ministry Tuesday, the shipping industry picked up significantly from October, when the country posted a 16% drop. The telecommunications and display sectors also continued their upward streak. But overall, most exports were hit by low global oil prices. While total exports amounted to $44.4 billion in November, imports came to $34 billion, plunging 17.6% on-year for a record-high trade surplus.
It's difficult to translate the surplus as positive since it's a result of worsening imports and already sluggish exports.
Korea isn't the only one that's been suffering from weak trade. Some experts even say it's actually better off than many other countries. According to the World Trade Organization, global trade has dropped by more than 10% this year. But in the midst of the downward trend, Korea is expected to jump up a spot to become the world's sixth biggest exporter for the first time ever, after being in seventh since 2010.
In terms of quality, Korea's export market actually saw some improvement as it diversified its export items, like in the display, cosmetics, and processed food sectors.
That's why experts believe while it won't reach it this year, next year Korea could make its annual trade target of $1 trillion. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now, more Koreans in their 50s and above are either working or looking for employment, even as their younger peers are out of work. Experts say the trend was expected, given Korea's rapidly changing demographics, but that doesn't mean there isn't cause for concern. Shin Se-min reports.
Korea's job market is unbalanced these days, especially between the old and the young. While the country's youth unemployment rate topped 10% in June, a 15-year high, more than 10 million Koreans ages 50 and older are either working or are in the market for a job. Statistics Korea said Tuesday that of Korea's economically active population of 27 million, the 50-plus group tallied over 11 million in the third quarter, up 3.7% on year and a record high. Those aged 39 or below, normally considered the backbone of a country's working population, slipped by 0.2% compared to the same period last year. The economically active population includes both employed workers and those looking for a job. Breaking down the figures further, just 10 years ago, the number of economically active people in the 50-plus age group was half that of those under 30, which is in stark contrast of these latest figures. Experts say the shift was inevitable given Korea's extremely low birth rate and rapidly aging population. But now there are growing concerns the trend will drag down the country's growth in the decades to come. The country's slowing economy is adding to the burden, as is the high youth unemployment rate.
Members of the older generation are almost being forced to work as they continue to support their children financially. It's a continuous cycle.
On top of that, experts say many members of the older generation haven't fully prepared for life after retirement, which is also pushing them out into the job market. And once they get there, it can be tough, with the majority of workers over 50 are mostly hired for part-time positions that lack job security and often come with poor working conditions. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, lawmakers are in a race against time to wrap up their review of the government's 2016 budget proposal ahead of a Wednesday deadline. Our National Assembly correspondent Ji Myung-gil has more.
Lawmakers missed the first deadline for completing the budget review process, which was Monday, but hope to make the next deadline for the budget's passage on Wednesday. As the negotiations continued on Tuesday, the ruling Saenuri Party urged the opposition to cooperate in finishing deliberations on the $333 billion budget bill.
The opposition is making an issue of the funds allocated to regional social overhead capital projects, promoting the Saemal movement internationally and the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs, and trying to use those things for its own political gain.
Another sticking point between the rival parties has to do with a free childcare program for toddlers proposed by the president. The opposition wants the central government to fund the initiative, while the ruling party wants municipal governments to fund it. On Tuesday, the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy Party urged the government to take full responsibility for funding the program.
President Park Geunhye pledged full government support for free daycare for toddlers up to age 5, but the central government is refusing to allocate any money for the program for next year.
Lawmakers are also seeking to pass other pending livelihood bills on Wednesday, including a proposed revision to the tax code that would allow the government to collect income tax from the clergy for the first time, starting in 2018. Kim Young-kip, Arirang News.
Now, President Park Geunhye and scores of other world leaders are in Paris for the UN Climate Change Conference. It's the largest event of its type in history, and the leaders are working on launching a new global climate system. And with environmentalists saying it's high time words were put into action, the South Korean leader stressed Seoul is already doing its part. Our presidential office correspondent Hwang Ji-hye reports from Paris.
President Park called for collective international efforts for a new deal on tackling climate change. Addressing some 140 heads of state at the opening session of the UN Climate Change Conference in Paris on Monday, President Park reiterated South Korea's goal to slash greenhouse gas emissions by 37% by 2030. Over 160 countries, which account for 90% of global emissions, have put forward their climate targets for post-2020. President Park said Seoul will reach its goal by fostering a new energy industry.
단계적으로 제로 에너지 빌딩을 의무화하고 대형 공장들은 ICT를 적용한 스마트 공장으로 모두 바꾸어 나갈 것입니다. 한국의 대표적인 섬인 제주도는 전기차와 신재생 에너지를 100% 보급해서 카본 프리 아일랜드로 전환하겠습니다.
By doing that, President Park said Korea will create a new market worth $100 billion by 2030 and make 500,000 jobs. As an end product of this year's global climate talks, world leaders are aiming to achieve a successor treaty to the 1997 Kyoto Protocol, which expires in 2020. On Tuesday, President Park will give a special speech at the UNESCO headquarters, becoming the first South Korean leader to do so. She will then leave for Prague for a summit with the Visegrad Group, which is composed of the Czech Republic, Hungary, Slovakia, and Poland. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News, Paris.
And as a follow-up to that report, President Park met with her Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of the UN climate talks in Paris to discuss North Korea's nuclear program and other bilateral issues. Seoul's presidential office said that during their 40-minute-long meeting, President Park asked Putin to play an active role in persuading North Korea to return to the long-stalled six-party denuclearization talks, which also involve South Korea, the US, Russia, China and Japan. The South Korean leader also asked Moscow to cooperate and support Seoul's efforts to create the proper conditions for a peaceful unification of the two Koreas. In response, Putin promised to help resolve the dispute over Pyongyang's nuclear program through diplomatic means, but he didn't really elaborate. The two leaders also vowed to further cooperate in developing Russia's Far East and Siberia. Now, as the two Koreas gear up to hold a round of high-level talks next week, experts in the South are busy speculating about what demands the North might have. For more on a possible bargaining chip in Pyongyang's arsenal, our Connie Kim reports.
North Korea's recent test of a submarine-launched ballistic missile may widely have been judged a failure, but experts say it's only a matter of time before the North is successful.
It usually takes about 10 test firings before a successful launch of an SLBM. Looking at the last two tests, there is a possibility the regime could succeed within 5 years. However, the regime may already have test-fired the SLBM more than we know, and in that case, a success could come sooner, within 2 or 3 years.
The test comes as the two Koreas prepare for a round of vice ministerial talks slated for next week, a factor that has some analysts concerned. While some analysts say North Korea views inter-Korean dialogue as separate from its military development, others suggest North Korea could use the SLBM test as a bargaining chip in the upcoming inter-Korean talks. The experts say that when the two Koreas meet next week, it's highly likely Pyongyang will ask for greater inter-Korean cooperation, including the resumption of a long-stalled tour program to Mount Kumgang or the lifting of economic sanctions. They add that Pyongyang could continue to exploit progress in its missile development in future inter-Korean negotiations.
Although North Korea failed in its SLBM test this time around, the fact that it's continuing to develop its ballistic missile capabilities implies there's not much time left until the North is successful. In the long term, North Korea will once hold to acknowledge the need for sincere talks with the regime.
South Korea's National Intelligence Service labeled North Korea's SLBM test on Saturday a failure, saying the missile's trajectory could not be traced. In May, North Korea claimed to have successfully launched a ballistic missile from a submarine, which flew 150 meters before crashing into the sea. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now. Do enjoy the rest of your day wherever you're watching us, and stay tuned to Arirang TV. Goodbye.